Where were we?
Okay. Yeah, we were about to hear the story. So take us chronologically. Tell us the story.
For sure. I'll kind of blend a little bit of the two together to keep it
The two? Oh,
punctual.
the first and second.
Yes, because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
made two attempts at this and we succeeded on the second attempt.
Mhm.
So they're very different. They're very different starts, to say the least. Is they started in the same locations, which was in the Anasazi like HOA, like the plateau, Anasazi Plateau area. It's like a little HOA of very wealthy individuals up on the cliffs,
Yeah.
kind of overlooking the town. And but that bridge area is where it starts for a very classic little alpine route called Cowboy Ridge. It goes about 5-7. And so on the first attempt, 2023 was a nasty year for the West Coast when it came to weather. It was very winter heavy, and so even in the deserts, it was. We showed up, and ultimately, I mean, to kind of make it short, is the whole traverse, even in the middle of the day, it never really got above freezing. Uh, you know, and whereas on the second attempt, we got out of our car, getting dropped off, and it's a nice crisp 50 Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're like, oh yeah, nice way to start the day. And nonetheless, we cruise up from there. The first peak itself is Cowboy Ridge, goes about 5-7. A really great entry route to the park. And we chose that as, instead of the West Temple, which is the normal traverses start, we chose Cowboy Ridge as it's this amazing, it's just the on-ramp to get on to the rest of this ridge, whereas when you start West Temple, it feels as though you're cutting into, halfway into a ridge, whereas Cowboy is like you start at the beginning, and it's great to just like you start there as a really definitive kind of like shot of the gun to really get going. And so from the base of where we started in that neighborhood, it's about 2 miles to the base of that climb, and then about it's 3/4 of a mile to the top of Cowboy Ridge. So collectively, it's a little shy of 3 miles. And so both times we did in about 2.5 hours from base to the top of Cowboy Ridge. From there, you drop into a meadow, and then there's the second peak just neighboring it that takes about it's a quick like 500 feet, third class, and from there it was it was just a nice easy trek on the second go. On the first go, it was misty, icy, and cold. It was actually breaking out the spikes to go up the slabs to go up it.
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah. And there was this really heavy haze, over it. Yeah. And so it's just like as the sun was kind of coming over it, there was this like just immense fog that really affected visibility. And so, and this first day in most cases was expected to be really easy. It was our longest day and our most elevation gain for the trip. It was expected to be probably around 9.5 miles, maybe 10 miles for day one, and about 8,000 feet of elevation gain for the first day. The first day was considered stat day. It's where you're just really putting on the numbers, and you're doing pretty much the most of the day. You're doing known routes that are commonly done by individuals that enjoy this style of route.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, you do Cowboy Ridge, you go in the meadows, you hit Kinnisava. From there, you come back down, and then you rappel. You go to the edge of Kinnisava to where you start looking at the West Temple, which would be peak 3. And that ridge itself goes at 5-6. It's not terribly hard. Most of it's third and fourth class scrambling with the occasional, techie kind of scrambling along on this. Same with Cowboy Ridge. Much of it has like 3 or 4 portions where you have to pay attention. Aside from that, you're just on exposed ledges, doing relatively delicate, but not really that technical of movement. And so we do one full 70-meter rappel, to which we used a fiddle stick for. It's a canyoneering technique, so that we could reduce on weight tremendously. So, a fiddle stick, if you have, you tie it with a pole line, it allows you to actively use a singular rope. And with the pole line allows you to double its length. So, being said is most people, when they climb, they pass the rope to midway. With a 70-meter rope, you'd get 35 meters out of it, right? And so instead of hauling 2 full 70-meter ropes, which, are close to like about like 12 to 15 pounds, so about like 3 to 4 kilos, depending on the diameter, a piece, we could save, and not mentioning the space that it takes up, that you have to either haul it on your shoulders or in your pack, or on top of your pack. It's a huge savings. I mean, it just, so much energy is saved from that collectively throughout all the steps and distance that you do and all the climbing that you do. And so ultimately that piece allows you to, you can wrap the singular rope around whatever bush, tree or rock you decide that you want to rappel off of. And then from there, you tie what's called a stone knot, which is actually a hitch. And then you pass, it's essentially a plastic stick through this.
It's not essentially. It's a plastic stick.
It is a plastic stick. We use something called a smooth operator, which is essentially the same thing, just a different brand. That has 2 holes in the ends of each side. You clip carabiners to them, and then from there you clip your pole line to that. And so once we rappel down and it's unweighted, you pull that pole line, and that fiddle stick will actually release from that knot, and then the whole knot itself will come completely undone, and then everything falls.
You're still having to take a 70-meter pole line.
Yes,
okay.
But
it's way smaller.
What we ended up taking was a 6.5 millimeter pole line, and so that's like
dental floss.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, it's
probably like this much.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. And so we brought 70 meters of 6.5 millimeter, and it's so light. It's probably 5 pounds. And the space that it takes up, tremendously less. And if we need to lead on it, we can do so.
Is it rated to?
It's rated.
Wow. 6.5 is rated for a full, not twin. It's a full rated.
Maybe.
I call baloney. Yeah. You have this fiddle stick here, don't you?
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Yeah. All right. So I just need to borrow an arm from you. So kind of giving a visual. So he's my tree. So from here, I'd take one end and wrap it around my said piece of protection. And then from there, I would take my double that I took around and I would pass it over. And then I'd pass it over again. And I grab these 2 strands.
And then the stick goes.
And then I take my stick, which, I mean,
it's way smaller than I thought it was going to be.
Plastic stick.
It's strong. It is. Yeah.
But, and then you'd pass it through this said knot from there, and you'd cinch it down. And so this is where my pole line in. And so the first person that goes down, you take an extra carabiner and you click it to the second portion of that, and you can click it to there. So if this line tries to pull out, it can't actively pull out.
Yeah.
And so being said is once the first person goes down, it's completely safe.
You want to be first.
Yes. You preferably want to be first.
Yeah, Rochambeau, yeah.
And so from there, on the second person is where the hazard itself that really the fiddle stick gets its reputation for, or poor reputation for, is that you do take on a certain amount of risk. And the fact being that the system, if you do it incorrectly, it's not going to stay done. So nonetheless, though, is you rappel down, making sure that you keep it consistently weighted. Because if you unweight it, that actually will allow for this to this to easily move. You can see how easily it moves, right?
That's terrifying.
And so when it's cinched down, and like I said, done plenty of tests on this, is if it's weighted, it takes a pulley system and even more so to actively rip that stick out. And so nonetheless, though, you get to the bottom, and from there you pull that line, and it comes out, for most people, terrifyingly easy. And then I'm going to pull that line. Wow. The rope comes undone, and then it slides around the tree and it falls down to you.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I think it seems like similar concept, obviously, to like a Beal escaper, except you're more versatile because you can wrap that around larger objects and stuff than an escaper, essentially, right? So, yeah, no, I kind of get like the concession there of like why you'd want that for sure.
Well, just as a short example, just today I was on a different mountain, and the only anchor that we had to make a really nice, clean rappel, that the tree itself was 20 feet back on the ledge. I can wrap it around that tree and sacrifice 40 feet of rope and then make that knot right over the lip of the edge. And then I rappel down, I pull that fiddle stick right over the edge. It comes right out. And then I just pull the rope and it comes back there. Whereas like, I'm not carrying 40 feet worth of tat on me. I mean, I could, but like that gets really heavy. That gets really bulky.
I think even from the perspective of the Beal escaper is like what you just alluded to, where it's like you can actually make the knot for the fiddle stick over the edge. Whereas the escaper, you can't do that. And like I've actually had this situation where I've gotten rope stuck before, which is like part user error, but part also I don't think it was just the user. So like what happened is exactly what you're talking about. So for those listening, if you have a really steep section and then you have a lip and then your anchor is behind the lip, because it has to be. If you have a Beal escaper, which is kind of like this Denema friction hitch, relying on like, essentially tension and then release and tension and release, when you have the edge creating almost like a 90-degree angle and you pull, all the tension flips the rope up instead of pulling it down. So like what should have taken 20 pulls to release a Beal escaper might take you like 400. Like I had to leave a rope and recover it the next day ice climbing because like we pulled it like 350 times and it was like minus 36 and my girlfriend got frostbite on her pinky and we were like, fuck this, like left the rope, pieced out, headed home. And then the next day I came back, climbed the climb again, got the rope, and like the escaper was like almost close to releasing, but like we were there 2 people for almost an hour straight in like minus 35, minus 36, full on running down a hill, cranking on a rope. And like I was just in disbelief that this thing didn't release. And I still really like the escaper, but what you just expressed is like a huge advantage in certain situations for the fiddle stick for sure.
Zion's a really ledgy and bushy location. I mean, notoriously so. If you don't get a rope stuck, it is like a miracle day. Like you become a pro. If you climb in Zion National Park a lot, you become a pro at getting ropes unstuck.
and stuck.
and stuck.
Is it worse than Red Rocks?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. They put up pretty good competition with each other. Yeah.
Well, there's like a photo that I think you sent to us where there's just like a bush and the rope's been pulled into like this bush and it's just like this tangled mess and like it looks like so messed up.
It's that phrase I like to call fiddle stuck.
Yeah.
And so and like I said, with the fiddle stick, I know a couple of things. I know that within 5 seconds, I know if I'm fucked or not.
Yeah.
The Beal escaper, I could be yarding on that thing for an hour and I can go, can I ascend this safely? I don't know if I'm like 1 pull or like 3 bounces away from this coming out. Whereas a fiddle stick, I'm like, I didn't take the carabiner out. It's time to ascend the rope. And being said is if it's actively stuck, it's actively stuck. I know it's stuck. I know the situation I'm in immediately.
And weighting the rope's just going to make it more stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I know my situation and I know how to adapt to that situation. Whereas the Beal escaper gives me too much because I'm doing full 70s. I'm doing full 70-meter rappels. So most of the time I can't see my anchor anymore. And the rope stretch is tremendous. At the end of a 70-meter, the rope stretch is tremendous. Majority of the efficiency that you get from just using your body to pull pull the rope itself is lost in the stretch of 70 meters worth of rope stretch. I mean, you look at rope stretch, the elongation on it's like anywhere from like 25 to 35%. You're losing that much power that your body's providing on that rope. before you actually are actively applying force to pulling that. So the Biela escaper not being able to see it gives me too much ambiguity when it comes to, do I need to go up and save my rope? Because I have 6 more pitches to get off this. This is the difference between me calling SAR or getting stuck on the wall. Whereas like, if I know I'm like screwed, like right there and then, if it, you know, I know that is, you know, I know that I have to address that situation immediately. And I'm not like asking questions that, you know, I wish I had the omniscience to kind of like float up there and like go, oh, yep, that's 4 poles away. Yeah. You know, if I had only put a 13-1 on this thing, I would have gotten it
as
off.
you're jugging up.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like if you're jugging up a Biela escaper, like your jugging could inherently release the Biela escaper just by the fact that you're like pulling on the rope.
Yeah, there's a possibility.
You'd have to like climb like really delicately so that you don't like shock load the system.
Yeah, when I went and recovered that rope, I did not have the balls to I had a micro tracks on the rope, but I also had another rope below me that I was leading on because I was like, I'm not like, I'm like, no way, man.
Yeah,
I'm
no
not
way.
Gonna fall on this thing like that. It was just bananas. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for painting the picture there. You know, this is how you're traversing this landscape.
Yeah, and so the last thing to say upon why the fiddle stick was such a like an essential tool is it saves weight, and it also is just like saves space, saves weight, saves efficiency. You know, I don't have to coil another rope. You know, now we're also looking at cool. Now I don't have to leave tat. I can be more leave no trace. I can go to these places and I can honestly go through these locations and try to minimize my impact on such delicate ecosystems. You know, the desert being one of the most delicate ecosystems in the US, and trying to minimize that while still trying to recreate, you know, so I'm still doing damage, but being able to minimize that by not leaving my trash all over the place is, you know, now other people aren't going to be inspired to rappel off old tat just because they're too cheap, or, you know, they're trying to save time or something, you know, like the amount of deaths that happen because of that. And then I'm not leaving junk on the bushes and choking trees out. I mean, I imagine you've possibly have seen, you know, pictures where trees have grown over the years, and, you know, like us as a community, normally we clean up that stuff, but not always. Sometimes they're on more obscure routes, and these trees and bushes are all, you know, gnarled up simply because, you know, we didn't clean up the stuff that we've left behind. And so if I can avoid that altogether, I mean, cool. That's just add that to the tick list of what's fantastic about using it. You know, like obviously there's downsides to using everything, but you weigh those, you know, you weigh those pros and cons.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'd push back on for listeners, and I think Kyle and I talked about this a little bit, is like, I definitely agree with everything you just said. And the only caveat I'd give is like, there is like a larger degree of competency that you need to have with a fiddle stick. And so for like, you know, if you're tired or you're not 100% confident and competent with your piece of gear, there is more risk and you can kill yourself easier. And so the only like message that I'd like to say, just because like this is the climbing majority, there could be new climbers listening to this, is like, don't go out and just inherently buy yourself a fiddle stick, and it's not worth killing yourself to not leave tat on a tree.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh no, very
like,
much.
So it's like there's a middle ground here. Like I think people have a right. And of course, like if we can progress into these things, and there's a time and a place, but like your gear is only as useful as you are competent with it. And so that's the only caveat I'd give to just like newer climbers who could potentially be listening to this, is like, don't kill yourself to not leave a piece of tat on a tree.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think everybody here is in agreement on that.
Practice.
Yeah.
Especially with this piece of equipment, because like I said, when I was doing it, if you don't do it right, you do it wrong, and that will completely come undone. Yeah. So there is,
I mean, as you saw.
Yeah.
And you sneezed and that thing came out.
Yeah.
The level of margin for error is
low.
Zero for use of fiddle stick. So making sure that you're extremely competent when using that piece of equipment and being comfortable doing so is essential.
Yeah. That being said, though, you alluded to like tat being left behind, and that's just as much as a zero room for error. Like did you see my Instagram post like just recently?
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, fucked. Like we came across that piece of tat, and like it looked brand fucking new. Like I've come across sun damaged tat before, and it's like very clear. Like, okay, this is like whitewash. It's like looked really bad.
Yeah.
This thing looked bomber, like no frame, colored, like beautiful. And like, so I'm like rigging for rappel, like getting ready. And like right before I weighed it, I'm like, let's double, we should double check this. And like we look over and like we see this little spot that's a little frayed, and he like picks at it and the whole thing just like rips apart. And like the video obviously started like after we had picked apart it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But dude, I have the thing in my garage. It's like you can like feel it creaking and like cracking under your weight, just like pulling on it like that.
Always check the things.
Always check your tat. Like I don't care how good it fucking looks. And honestly, this like, you know, that's like the main message that's being put across. Like check your tat. Like fuck that. Like if you're doing like a more obscure route where you're wrapping on tat, put a backup,
dude,
and then wrap with all your weight on the old tat. And if it holds, then your second can choose to remove the backup.
I think
it's like ice climbing.
The point is just complacency kills. And actually, I was going to express this in ice climbing. It's like something that's like common that like I've, you know, talked to guides and like competent climbers about is like you'll get like a V thread of cord, you know, like not a dry V thread. So like a cord V thread. And like over time, like the ice melts and like, you know, goes over it. And so you'll come to this V thread and you'll think you can see this little bit of cord and you think you're clipping into a V thread, but it's actually the tail of the fisherman's that's just frozen in. And so people clip it, you know, take themselves off, weight it, and then the thing just breaks out and you fall to your death. Wow. And so it's like, it's just like complacency kills, right? Yeah. It's like, check what you're doing, you know, double check, look at things, understand like what are the risks that you're not aware of in the situation. And like, that's just doing your due diligence and, you know, learning from, you know, people who have paid their dues more and like having mentorship. So you can like, I don't know that from experience. I know that from talking to people that I've been fortunate enough to like have time around who are incredibly competent in the mountains and like being able to just tell me that. And now I'm like, I look at a V thread and I don't just assume like, oh, that's good. You know, I'm double checking and clipping that, but like it takes a person, you know, telling you that message and really like ingraining that in your brain of like, you know, like, make sure you know what you're doing because
climbing's dangerous.
Climbing is dangerous.
Well, you know what's so ominous is
it's amazing. Yeah.
And I didn't know this, but on the sling, the tag, it says warning, climbing is dangerous. It literally like it says that on the sling. And I checked all my other slings and they say it too, but like it was so ominous. Like I got the picture of that and it's like warning, climbing is dangerous. I'm like, fuck, like that's a crazy ominous message.
Well, so here to really, really push home on like the redundancy we had is like, yeah, it's ridiculous. You know, sometimes you look at the fiddle stick and go, that's ridiculous. But you can go, okay, we packed a fiddle stick. Okay. We have a 70, you know, we have the 7 meter line and an additional 75 meter line. So if we need to chop, like we could chop. And then from there, we have a second fiddle stick in our bag in case we have to chop and continue to fiddle stick. No, if we lose our second fiddle stick, we still have the pole line that we have left and our rope that we have left. And now if we don't have that, we also, guess what? We have like, you know, we have 2 additional slings with some like, and we're like, whatever, lose a carabiner. Okay. If it gets to the point in which we've cut 2 fiddle sticks, pole lines, and we're cutting our ropes, like, okay, cool. I can sacrifice these $8 or $16 that we packed just in case and some gear just in case we need to get off this freaking cliff to stay alive. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But we have about 5 different systems in place for us to be able to rappel. You know, I'm not just going, okay, if the fiddle stick gets stuck and we literally can't climb up it or can't ascend it.
Just some like bones on the side of like, I'm just like sitting there at the belay ledge.
Yeah, you have, you know, it's just like you know, like that's where some of the competency comes into play is like, you go, okay, cool. I have 5 different ways I can rescue myself and I have that knowledge to do so. You know, it's not just relying on one piece of gear or one way of going about that. And so when we go on this adventure, it's just like we have a lot of backups that come into play, which is why we didn't have to take a bolt kit, you know, or why we chose not to take a bolt kit. Is one, we want to avoid putting bolts, and we feel that we have enough trad pieces, we have enough slings, and we have enough additional methods at which if we have to cut our line, we now can go to step 2, step 3 to be able to, you know, continue to kind of minimize the gear we place behind.
Can you fiddle stick with a stick?
You know, I probably wouldn't.
like a thick branch.
Well, here's the thing. So my thought is that have you ever rappelled and then you pull your rope and then it gets stuck in a bush, right? Have you seen the way that it wraps around sticks? And you're just like, son of a bitch, and you're pulling at it, and like every which way that it curves around, it gets stuck. So that friction that the dynamic rope gets with sticks and bark,
Just not coming
just to
out.
kind of entertain this ridiculous idea is the fact being is I don't think the stick would actively pull. I think you'd actually have to actively break it to have it release.
You wouldn't do that.
And at that point, you've probably already broken it on the forces that you've likely repelled on that knot with.
Yeah.
Don't
fiddle stick with a stick.
Don't fiddle stick with a stick.
Okay.
Use a plastic stick instead.
Okay.
So kind of like moving on, like through this traverse here, like, I think it's so broad and like so much to encompass. But either continue taking us along this journey, or what is kind of like the next most like memorable like challenge or thing that you experienced on it, if that makes sense.
Luckily enough, the next peak is one of the most memorable for at least the first attempt.
Yeah.
And that's where our first attempt pretty much takes a very hard halt. So we take 2 rappels to get down to the notch, and we ascend up West Temple. There's like I said, there's that riding ridge. It's mostly 3rd and 4th, very exposed. So it's kind of one of those things where you don't feel like you're going to fall off, but you look over and your brain's like, you could fall off and die. Like you'd have to chuck yourself off the cliff, but your brain tells you like, dude, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
And then you get to this last little short portion that's like a little rinky dink, 60 foot, just enough to be an inconvenience at the top to get to the cap of the plateau itself. And, on both times, we have heavy bags going up these ridges, so our bag, all of our stuff, our food, climbing gear, the whole 9 yards, going up this, we're packing, like 50 pounds a piece going up this. And, on our second go, probably around 45, we were able to drop, a couple kilos. And so from there on this is where I'll kind of shoot off with the first attempt to kind of put a close to that one. Is we went over so we got to the top of the West Cap, and the snow is at that really inconvenient in between to where you're like, okay, can I either just post hole or can I stand on top of it? I don't want to, you would walk across it, and then one of your legs would plummet down to your hips and the other one would stay on top of the snow. And then you'd have to have your partner come over, dig you out, and then they would fall in. And then, so you'd have that consistent fight. And so the top of this plateau, aside from getting the temple cap itself, of the West Temple, is across the entire thing is collectively about a half mile across the entirety of it. Maybe, it's about the larger portion of the plateau itself is about a mile. But getting to the portion of the temple cap itself is about a half mile, circumnavigating the top cap. So this higher elevation sandstone tends to have a plateau upon it, and then it tends to have these smaller sandstone caps on top of them that are probably like a fourth of the size of the plateau itself. And so hence why they got the temple names. And so nonetheless, though, is, we post-holed our way through there. And on our first attempt, we decided, we're so tired from hauling these bags for the first day. We've already gone 6 miles today. We're already freaking tired with these bags. I don't want to have to, let's minimize the elevation we have to gain with these packs. And that was probably one of the worst choices we made for the first attempt. And so from there, we circumnavigated the cap on, unwittingly, we didn't really know much about climbing in the snow. And so we went around the northeast face, which has the most snow on most faces, and at least in the northern hemisphere. And to go 0.3 miles around that cap, we were on about varying between 40 to 55 degree slopes of snow that would, it felt like swimming through sand because the snow had gotten up to about our cheeks on these degree slopes. Little did we know it was avalanche territory. I now have that wisdom now. Ignorance is bliss, right? So luck goes a long way on certain circumstances. To go around and to also kind of paint this is just 100 feet away from where we were circumnavigating was a 2,000 foot drop. And so we're swimming against the snow, really, hoping we don't glissade off this thing. And so to go a third of a mile, it took us 6 hours to, when we both mentally broke going around that. And we're like, this really sucks. This is so hard. And we ended up camping on the other side on the same plateau that day. We had planned for 2 more peaks ahead that day. We said, not a chance. The sun's going down. We barely have time to make camp.
Yeah.
On the second attempt, we went up the temple cap. We went to the other side. There's still snow on it, probably about half the quantity. We rappel off the north side and we get to the other side. On attempt 1, it took us collectively 7 hours from side to side. On the second attempt, it took us 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So you went up and over versus up, back, and then around.
Yep.
Yeah.
And from attempt 2, we were able to hit 2 more peaks that day, and get around big slabs. And, on the first attempt, it was dropping below 0 degrees Fahrenheit.
Are you able to use that temperature to your advantage and use like the freezing of the snow to traverse like areas that might be powdery?
Yeah. So you want to start early on certain areas, and we did on the second attempt. On the second attempt, we did, it was this fine, delicate balance between like, okay, it's on the north face, but the top end I want it to get enough snow so that it actually gets soft enough so that I can kick step it. So and it's not just a sheer ice wall that I have to really put spikes into.
And so are you running an axe and micro spikes? Is that what you're doing?
Micro spikes, but no axe.
Wow.
So because like I said, we're trying to minimize the gear that we have.
Yeah. Double fiddle stick, like jamming up.
It'd probably work.
Honestly, it really would. Yeah. But I mean, we take no responsibility for people listening.
Fiddle sticks are dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so, on the first attempt, that night, it drops well below 0. It's wind gusting. And, I had, clearly, I had gotten GI issues. So you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're just like, you want to avoid it, but you got to go outside in those temps. And nonetheless, though, is like everything was kind of going awry and not going right, you know? And, but it was meant to be a learning experience. We went up there to kind of like really suffer, get a feel for where we are, what's going to happen. And like, what did we pack that we shouldn't have packed, and like really use it as a learning experience, knowing we're going to fail.
Yeah.
And have a little sufferfest to kind of like top it off. And so, it's like, I had brought a 20-degree bag, and it was I was really testing the survival rating of that bag, that night. And, nonetheless, though, we ended up rappelling off the face to kind of drop in, which I'll address on the second attempt. And we saw that the weather report was, in less than 24 hours, there was to be 5 days straight of blizzard snow in that area. And so, so we're looking at that weather and we're going, we need to get off here because that's actually life-threatening. And so we said, okay, cool. We got enough time to hit a handful of peaks. So we hit a handful of peaks, and then, later, we got out probably around, the next day. We ended up, really pushing, and we did an 18-hour day, pushing to get out of there because we were a little greedy. We ended up getting extra peaks in. We probably could have gotten out in like 7 or 8, but we got greedy and got some peaks. Luckily enough, we, got out. We descended some 2,000-foot gully that was just absolutely an atrocious bushwhack. I've asked around, and I don't think I've found someone that's done that.
That's an FA.
Yeah.
FD at first descent.
A big FD.
It's the LD. It's the last descent.
Yeah. I hope it's an LD. I hope no one has to experience that canyon.
Yeah.
And we were just lucky enough that we were looking at satellite imagery, and we're just lucky enough that
it went
with a full 70.
Nice. Yeah.
But so obviously that first time it was just like, we were fighting, wet gear, frozen gear, a little bit of sickness, and just really suboptimal temperatures and terrain. And just, we were fighting snow. We were post holing the majority of the time. We were like, at least thigh deep in snow. And we're looking at the rest of this going, we're looking at the south sides of certain things on, the further portion of the traverse, even without the weather coming. Even if we didn't have the weather coming in on us at that point in time, we looked at it and we said, it's not even worth checking it out because that's the south side. The south side, we're going up above to our stomachs. What are those north canyons look like? That's we're only going to get more of what we had already run into on the north end of, the upper cabs. And so on the second attempt, it's just like weather was slick, like it was really on our side this time around. We really paid attention to it. And, nonetheless though, we get to the other side of the West Temple and, like we did in 20 minutes and we're like, cool, it's only 1 o'clock. And, like we started at 7, it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, cool, we got all the time in the world. We hit peak 4, nice, easy 4th class. We wrap around the front slabs, which were a nightmare on the first attempt because they're just like this, they're kind of like, they're like a 60-degree slope off into, like I said, off into that, like 2,000 foot face off into the Oak Creek drainage. And so, it's like at a certain degree, it just gets really nasty, especially on that white sandstone, just the white Navajo sandstone. Sandy. Yeah, it's really sandy, really slick. Yeah. And so, nonetheless, though, we wrap around. There's pretty much close to no snow on that slab on the second go around. We hit peak 5 called the Witch Head. On our first attempt, my buddy was dead convinced that like this was the way on one of the sides. He ended up climbing this 10x 10x route, and I was like, dude, this is fucked. And his feet and hands are crumbling as he's climbing this thing. He's running it out like 120 feet. Like his first 35 meters, he had no protection. I was like, this is fucked up. And he ends up climbing this at 10. It's like 10 plus X. And he gets to the top. I climb it and I follow it. On two portions of the climb, I'm using the same holds and footholds he was using, and I rip them completely off. Like I completely, I take my little top rope, whip off of it. Like, what the hell? I'm still holding rocks in my hand, holding dust in my hands. And I do that twice. And he's kind of like, oh, that could have been me.
Yeah.
It just happened to luckily have held for him. I railed him for a year because I knew that there was like some really easy route away. We go around on the second attempt. We hit the west side of the Witch Head. We do like 3, 5, 6 moves and then solo the rest of it. And it goes nice and easy. And so, yeah, looking at, answering a past question is, I knew that a harder portion was coming up. And I was like, okay, let's account for extra time and let's plan our food and our time allotments towards starting our mornings with the most energy we can have on our hardest climbs. And so, the Time Machine Traverse, which was the next set of 4 peaks collectively, it's like one big massif itself. We were able to, and it's the the Time Machine Traverse is north facing, so all of it's snowy. And so, that was kind of our, we're not amazing, we're not like amazing ice climbers. It's not something we have a particular reputation for. We're desert climbers, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he lived in Colorado, but he was a trad climber.
You also don't have any ice tools.
And we don't have any ice tools. We have a set of the spikiest micro spikes we can find. It'd be really preferable to have crampons on. Yeah. And it would have made a lot of this tremendously easy. And like I said, it went up to like M2. Yeah. And so it's like nothing harder than like 5-7 mixed climbing. But when you have like really kind of loose micro spikes on and they kind of slide around on your approach shoes.
Yeah.
Insane.
It sucks. It makes those moves feel a lot more technical and unnecessarily technical than they have to be. And so, luckily enough, we take advantage of the kind of crispy snow to kind of kick in. Something I do need to address, and I always forget, is at the start of this traverse, I woke up that morning with the flu. And so this whole trip, I collectively, go downhill as I had like fevers every single night, and I was losing my voice and, felt like someone was shanking me in the throat with knives. So it's one of those ones where you're like, you get sick and you're going to physically exert yourself to the point where you're like, you're either going to stay the same or it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And so, as it goes along, I progressively get worse along the way. but I still felt with training, with the physical training that we did from attempt 1 to attempt 2, felt that we could make it happen. With training, you have bigger reserves because it takes less to do more, and, stressing the importance of training for objectives. And so when inconveniences like that happen, you still have stuff in the tank, because like last thing you want to do is travel around the world and then go, man, if I was fitter, I'd be able to push past whatever this inconvenience is.
Yeah. I think on paper, the right thing to do is to turn around if you have the flu, but that's really easy to just say, you know what I mean? Because your body's going to deteriorate. And the reality is like so many things in life, and this completely transcends climbing, is like, usually when you need to do really important things don't just perfectly align. And that's just not how the world works. And this kind of like makes me think of like, like for me, Scott Johnson is kind of like this catalyst of getting into like climbing, and like a personal hero of mine. And like you can listen to him talk about his experience like climbing K2. And it's like, like the day you wake up to like try and summit or move to a higher camp, and like this is altitude, so it's slightly different, but like you're extremely ill. You're so ill that you would like instantly call in sick and just be like, I'm never fucking like getting out of my bed today. Like this is horrible, or like my experience, which I'm not comparing to K2 or to your traverse, like each to our own, but like, like the summit day I woke up for Denali, like I literally was like keeling over in the morning, like feeling like I was going to vomit everywhere, like having to pull myself together to be like, you're about to go like do this for like 12 hours straight. Like, are you willing to do this? And it's like, sometimes like, when you want to do really important things in your life, the stars don't align. You're actually going to be at your worst, and you have to dig deep. And it's a weird thing to be like, well, on paper, you should just say, this isn't good and you should turn around. But like in reality, like a lot of great things, and not like great in the scale of like Michael Jordan or something, just great like for our own like endeavors and our own personal goals, you sometimes have to do them at your worst. I don't know. That's a weird thing to like reconcile. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just kind of, it's looking at it, and your buddy's looking at you going, do you want to do it next year? Yeah. I was like, no, I don't want to do it next year. Yeah. And it's just like, I had the logistics so tied down that I said, okay, it's going to take us a day and a half. If we really if I'm sick as a freaking dog, I know that I can crawl. If you're willing, I can crawl my butt off this thing in like a day and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's like, well, as long as you promise that you don't complain. I was like, I can't promise that, but we're going on a traverse anyway. And so,
that's hilarious. Sorry to interrupt.
No, of course, it all useful. I mean, like I said, doing Denali in itself, I mean, that's an intense, and like I said, you do have to push yourself. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's something to be extremely proud of. Mm-hmm. And if anything, I mean, like that type of altitude is in cases, like it's much more difficult than, the flu that I had on that mm-hmm. front, I mean, I know it's all subjective, but like, that's still something extremely admirable. Mm-hmm. And so, but like I said, I just felt I had it so dialed that if I needed to back off of this thing, even though once you go over the West Temple, you do about a 700 foot rappel. And at that point, there's no turning around. There's the next point that you can get off is going over the altar of sacrifice, which is the 13th peak. So
you're like halfway at this point.
Yeah.
Just over it.
And you're just like, okay, I'm halfway. I'm sick. And I'm about to go to a point where I can't turn around.
Yeah. And so day 2 is crag day. And so that's where you take a pack. We do the time machine traverse. We crank it out in about 3 hours. That's our most technical one. It goes around 5.9 R, M2 R. I mean, you're not really like you're doing these moves, but you're not protecting them really. Mm-hmm. Like the protection is just so freaking scanty.
Yeah.
On these things, that it's just like, okay, cool. I know I'm not going to fall off the mountain because I'm tied in at the anchor, but I mean, there's a good chance that like a lot of my gear is going to rip and I'll hit it on the anchor. Like, our most important thing was we make solid anchors. We get good anchors. And so thankfully near the top.
You don't learn that freedom of the hills.
And so luckily enough, near the top, it kind of even, it eases out. And then the rest of it is kind of just, it's just kind of like Peak Bag City. You hit 3 peaks, like bump, bump, bump. And then you do a really, really fat exposed rappel. I mean, it was one of those ones where it was so beautiful that, like, in most cases you're like, I was really kind of daunted about this exposed rappel. Like, at the end of it, after you do pretty much two full 70s, and then you do a pendulum swing to get onto the next
on a fiddle stick.
Yes.
Pendulum fiddlestick rappel.
Yes.
As long as you're going first, it's okay.
Well, no, if you go
the carabiners in there,
can't the person who goes first then like hold the rope in place for the second? So
but
the other person doesn't have to swing.
The second guy takes all the risk.
Yeah. So being the logistics guy, I was the second guy the whole trip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fiddlestick man.
I was fiddlestick man.
Yeah. That inspires.
I don't know if Connor did it intentionally, but
I think that
the guy who convinces you
that's
to
like
use
the
this
contract,
fiddlestick should be going second for sure. Yeah.
That's the contract. It's like, I will not use. I'm going first on the fiddlestick. Signed, Kyle Brockschman. Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's the untangler. I'm the guy that has to deal with the fiddlestick. But nonetheless, though, yes, you do a pendulum on the fiddlestick, but it's still weighted the whole time.
Yeah,
he's holding the end of the rope, so you rappel just enough to where he was penduluming on the first, and then when I get down there, I rappel to a certain point,
and he pulls you,
and then he hand over hands while I hand over hand, and then we circus grip, and he gets me on the ledge.
Yeah.
So I have to do less of the running and back and forth on a fiddlestick. Hit one peak, rappel down the center of the massif. In the center of the massif, there's a huge cut to where there's like this really cool kind of riding like ice canyon. And luckily enough, there was no water flow through it, so we didn't have to worry about plummeting into anything. There was no running ice flow on it, so that was really nice, to say the least. And so, crag day is just you hit the witch head, you hit the so essentially from there you pick up your packs and you just walk, drop a pack, hit the peak, walk, drop, hit a handful of peaks. And so we hit witch head on day 1. So on day 2, time machine traverse. Broken Tooth, Rotten Tooth. We hit the droids just because they're super scenic. I mean, it only takes an extra 30 minutes just running out there. So, both the teeth probably like mid 5th. We soloed both of them, and then the droids is like 4th class, 3rd class, and it's just like it gives you a shot of the whole back area. And then you go up a 900-foot snow gully up the back of the altar of sacrifice to where you hit this last little 5-9 portion. And so my buddy solos up it like it's ain't no thing, and he does it, and then he brings his pack up and he comes back down. I was like, dude, like day 2 was kind of hard for me. I had really nasty fevers that night prior, and I was like, dude, we're coming to the tail end of our day on here. I'm really having a rough time with this pack. And so he's like, don't worry. I was like, I don't think I could solo with this pack. And he's like, okay, can you solo it without the pack? And I was like, yeah, I could probably manage that. And so he down solos it and then solos up with my heavy pack. I mean, granted, these things are like 40 pounds a piece. I'm like, kudos to you, man. And so you start out, and even in that, you start out stemming on these it's super snowy, icy chimney. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And like I said, to kind of accentuate the fact of how much of a monster he is, he's doing this in Nike running shoes, street running shoes. And that's where I've come to believe that the gear doesn't make the climber. It just fine tunes the climber. It's just like, granted, I don't think I could do it in those shoes, but it's nonetheless, it's just still fascinating me. So I try to solo this thing, and I kind of slip up twice, and then on the 3rd try, I get about 20 feet up. I almost turn the lip of this thing. You need to just get 20 feet, and then the rest of it's kind of just like a little slope that you have to kind of like just really drag yourself up through bushes on. And I get to about the top of this thing, and I fall. I take a 20-foot fall into a snowbank off. So I fall soloing into snow. And, it's like, I wasn't as concerned about it because it's snow. I just radioed to him, Rocky Talkies, I'll endorse them for, I don't get sponsors. I don't know if anyone gets sponsors from them because they're doing so well, but
there's some sponsorships. They denied us, but
yeah.
That's okay.
Bastards. Just kidding. We love you. Sponsor us.
But nonetheless though, it's like, I radio up to him. I mean, they're amazing when you can't see each other.
Oh, I never go alpine climbing without them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I radio up to him. I said, dude, fuck this. Like, throw a rope down to me. And I don't even mention it. I just,
did you hand over hand or do you have a descender?
He throws a rope to me and I just climb it.
Oh, okay. With the protection of the
rope. And so the way we're belaying is we did micro traction the whole way. So whoever's following, you just throw them on a micro and they just run up on a micro. Which again, if you're not experiencing that, don't do that unless you know what you're doing, because it is literally just a teethed pulley that is a one-way pull. And if you load it wrong, it will let loose. And so we go over the altar sacrifice. That's the end of day 2. And from there, the start of day 3 is climbing a neighboring peak to it. So our rappel off of the altar of sacrifice, we rappel into a notch, a full 70. Most of these rappels that we're doing are like, we rappel off the end of our ropes. So you get down and you're essentially making your anchor kind of stretched out and you're clipping a piece of protection to yourself, and then you're wrapping off the end of your rope to it. And, to make it long enough. And nonetheless though, do a full 70 down to that notch. And from there we fix from that notch our second rappel down, because we want to do this neighboring peak called Sky Island, right neighboring to it, which was our most technical portion of the traverse itself. It was listed as, mostly a free climb, but some nailing may be required. And we really wanted to free it. So we brought only clean gear to do it. So like, if not, okay, cool. We're going to do some really sketchy aid climbing to kind of get through it. And so, we sleep through, we rappel down that, we sleep through the night, we go back up that, we reascend that rope back to that notch, and then do the 2 pitches up, from which it goes at about 5.9 plus R. You go up probably like a 5.7 slab to where, you kind of nest some gear at the beginning on a handful of bushes. And then from there, the leader runs it out for about 50 feet, just on open face, pretty exposed, like 5.7, 5.8. And then from there, he gets to a traverse to where you can see people had nailed in the past, which made some killer finger locks. So we just, you just get in that traverse and you just lock down, and you're just like, this is fantastic. This is a great free route. And then from there, nice, easy 5.6 to the top. We kind of high five that one. We kind of high five from there, and we're just like, sweet. The hard portion, like the hard technical portion from the day is pretty much over. There's this last like 15 feet to the top from where we'd finished. We kind of tagged a little boulder on the side called the finger. And then we had to kind of up climb this 15 area. And I was like, can you just quickly anchor me off? I got a family. I don't want to die with a rope on my back. I'll take a whip on the big anchors. Like, I just want to, he's like, okay, I'll solo it. And so I went up there with the rope, and then I just fixed a hand line for him, and he hand lined right up that sucker. And so we tag the summit, we come back, and he says, okay, I'm just going to down solo this thing. I was like, I feel like I want to rappel this. My gut tells me like, I just want to rappel it, just cause we have it. And so I see this rock, like this boulder. And so I said, okay, cool. I'm just going to do a triple wrap around this boulder. And then can you just back me up like a hip belay? And so I get on this. I sit back on it. I crank on it. I have to walk 10 feet back before I hit the ledge. So I really test it out. It's holding my weight. I come to the lip of the edge and I look to my right, and I realize I'm about like 5 or 10 feet off my mark to my destination. I need to move to, I need to transition to my right as I rappel to get to the ledge that I need to land on. And as I turn the lip, I start to walk and I get focused on my destination, not where I'd come from. And what happens is these 3 wraps around the boulder, guitar string off the rock onto my backup, which is Connor. He's just hip laying me. He just has the rope around his waist, just old mountaineer style. And it cuts loose. So in the midst of my rappel, I feel it suddenly just come loose, and now I'm in a free fall. So I take a free fall for, luckily not terribly far. I take a 10-foot whip, which is farther than I ever wanted to take on a rappel.
Yeah, wow.
And I slam into the wall where Connor catches me. And I'm bleeding all over the place because I just absolutely just like knuckle punched the wall after taking this 10-foot rappel whipper.
Wow.
And he radios down to me like, "Hey, you doing okay?" And I'm like squeezing his guts out because he's on the ground holding
bearing down,
just bearing down, holding my weight. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I kind of I finish out the rappel. He down climbs from there. He kind of like check. I was like, I look at him. I go, should I be like bothered by what just happened?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Don't worry about it, man. You got caught." It's later at the end of that. It's like, "Dude, you handled that really well." I was like, "Well, you told me I was okay." And so it's like, sometimes it's okay for partners to kind of lie to you a little bit to kind of get you through the moment. Cause we still had a couple full 70s left to get off the mountain itself. And so I just, we just set up for those rappels and, got off the following notch. And, you think back to yourself, like, is that going to carry a weight on me? It stresses the importance of backups with rappels. I mean, you talked about your tat ripping and blowing up, and it's just kind of like,
I mean, you were like, it's like the same decision. Like I was ready to rappel, and we both were just like, let's do one more check.
Uh-huh.
And like, same thing. It's like you had wrapped this boulder 3 times. Like probably 8 out of 10 people could have just been like, "Okay, we're good." And then like that decision to add a backup saved your life.
Yeah. I mean, hands down. I mean, I looked, like being said, is that ledge being off destination. I'm going, you fall, and mentally I'm going, okay, what bush can I grab? And that's the only different, what dead bush can I grab? And hopefully I can catch myself before I fall down into this canyon that I'm staring, because when you're leaning into your brake hand, when it free falls, you immediately turn into what you kind of call skydive mode.
Where you were looking at.
Exactly. You turn into your brake hand and you start to like, you go stomach down. And so you get to watch where you're going. And so it's just like, and
what was like, so if he had not been there, like what would that fall have looked like? Like, was it like you're going to hit a ledge 20 feet down and then tomahawk all the way into the canyon? Or it was like a 200-foot free fall, then hit a ledge? Like, what was that like?
I would have clipped the ledge with that bush. And if I hadn't been able to grab that bush, I'd tomahawk into a 1,500-foot crevasse. It'd be done. It's just
rock tomahawking.
Yep. I would just rock tomahawk down into that thing. I'd be toast. I mean, there's no,
toast.
Done,
Yeah.
And so it's wild to think about that I was just one waist wrap away. And the fact that he was able to hold that
too,
is just,
how much heavier is he than you?
We're about the same weight. Probably he's 5 pounds heavier than me. He's not terribly.
Was he like against the rock, or like, was he just like friction on the ground? Like
it was, yeah. So he braced against the rock, and it still kind of, it pulled him down in, and, he really had to brace against the ground. And so it's just like, we come to the collective agreement. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to come to the collective agreement. Like if you're going to drag your partner off, like eventually you got to let go. So it's just like, I'd rather you go home to tell the news. And like, I'm not trying to be dramatic about this, but as being said, it's better for one of us to die than both of us to die.
Yeah.
And so there's
like the classic touching the void, movie.
Yeah, for sure. Cutting the ropes.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I never understood that, why people were like mad at him for cutting the rope.
They were there for they were there for hours.
Yeah, it's like obviously,
Just another. I mean, this is back in the day, but like another example where radios would be like super handy.
Yeah.
And touching the voice. I'm stuck. Just cuts it 2 seconds in. Flight just done. He's like, please, I'm at the bottom of the crevasse. I'm hurt very badly.
My ankles are broken.
Yeah, my ankles are broken. Tanner Hall.
Yeah. But wow, man, that's crazy.
Well, and for him to be able to be like, he's in that. So it's not like he can yell out, and I don't have a voice. So I've lost my voice on day 3. Like I'm squeaking. And so, I could talk at a really low tone, but that's about the best I got. I can't yell out or anything. So the fact that he could radio me and be like, dude, are you okay? And me be able to radio back, made a quick assurance that like, okay, cool. From there we can make our quick decisions and important decisions, cause he can't sit there forever. And so
it's like, get off the rope now.
And that was definitely for me personally, was the most climactic portion of that trip.
Yeah.
You'd fucking hope so, man.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Honestly, if you're going to top that, I'd be like, Jesus Christ, man. Holy shit. Yeah.
Closer than most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Closer than most.
And it's just like, you just don't know how to, it's like an expected duty of your partner, but at the same time, you kind of think to yourself, like, how can I even repay that kind of like, that's the reason I get to see my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm. How does your family feel about it, the incident?
We've talked about.
Did you tell your family?
Oh yeah. This is the first time
we're outing you.
Yeah, exactly. This is releasing to the public. No, I talk about these things, and I've talked about these things very candidly with my wife and with my family.
Is your wife a climber?
No.
Okay, interesting.
No, she's like a polar opposite.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm extremely candid about it, and that makes it so that it's like, okay, this is she knows that I'm putting in the best effort I can be. I remember when we first started even dating, she'd be like, all right, be safe. And I was like, I can't be. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I can't be safe. I say, we've since changed that saying, be as safe as you can be. I said, I can do that. And that comes through everything we've talked about in the past and in this past conversation. And so she understands that, just as much as, because we've talked about it, is that stuff happens. And the fact being that I came back, she's very happy that I came back, and that, and most importantly, that I learned from my choices that I made. Like, did I learn a lesson? And we can just be both grateful that we're lucky enough that
you had the opportunity to learn the lesson.
Exactly.
A lot of people don't have the opportunity.
Really lucky. Sounds very supportive, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, do you find climbing like an inherently selfish pursuit? Like, what's your position on that?
In most cases, I do find it to be extremely selfish. I find it really selfish. I'm not going to be guilty about it because, I'm going to look at, so before, when I initially started dating my wife, I looked at her and I said, this is something that's painfully important to me. Climbing is extremely important to me. And if you tell me to stop, I won't be me. And I can't support, I can't fake myself through life. You're not going to have a boyfriend or a husband or a father that you want. I can't be my best me. And that's what you're going to ask of me. So if you're going to tell me to ever stop climbing, we can't have a relationship. And building that foundation was essential. And because we were so understanding of because she was so understanding and I was so forthright about that right off the get-go, it allowed for, people go, how do you, people ask her all the time, like, how do you deal with him doing all these weird, crazy, things? And it's just kind of like, well, one, it's just what he does. You kind of become desensitized to it. And then all the rest of it comes from being extremely thorough about knowing what the hazards are, what I'm doing to mitigate those hazards, and knowing that, this is the person she married and there's a reason she married me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the word selfish tends to have this negative connotation, but I don't think it always has to. I think that we need to be self-serving to a certain extent, you have to like be able to be who you are in order to give that to somebody else. And if part of who you are is a risk taker or a climber, like that's just part of the puzzle that makes up who you are. And if you're like, someone has to be okay with that part of you. It's like, yes, it's selfish because you risk, you know, losing your life and that affects everybody around you, but we have the freedom to make those decisions.
Yeah. And as long as you have very candid understanding with, you know, whether it be relationships, whether it be your family, such and so forth. I mean, she goes, I need time to read books. Like I need time to do art. I need time to do videography. You know, she's a rather artistic individual. I mean, people have their outlets that they need to do, whether it be with other individuals or by themselves, and they need that time.
I think the difference there though, is that those activities don't risk death and inherently risk affecting other people. I
definitely say that selfish things are, you know, just like everything's gray.
I think I would really like, for me at least, like I'm actually in agreement with everything people are saying, but I think for me, like trying to reframe the narrative, because there's kind of like this implication. It's like, for example, your wife needs this artistic endeavor for herself to make herself feel fulfilled so she can be happy and the best individual she needs to be. Okay, she just happens to have this innate proclivity for art. That's not like, you know, if you want to get in debates of like free will and all these other different things, she didn't necessarily just like choose that. Like she's a byproduct of her genetics, her environment, her biology, and that makes her have a proclivity for that. That's no different than you having a proclivity for climbing. The distinction is that climbing happens to be inherently dangerous, so there's a lot more risk. But I would say like you need climbing just like she needs art to be fulfilled. So it'd be the same thing if you were just like, well, I need you to give up art so you can go become a banking executive to make $500,000 a year so our son can have the best whatever from our daughter, you know what I mean? And so, and most likely, like most people will be like, well, that's an outrageous request for someone to make. And I think it's just as outrageous to get like a climber to not do the thing that inherently makes them who they are, that gives them the outlet to like live life to the fullest. And of course, there's a middle ground of like, don't just go out and fucking be a jackass and kill yourself.
You don't need to be
like
reckless,
stupidly. Yeah. But at the same time, like it makes me think of like, you know, Jenny Lowe, where she's like, you know, Alex Lowe dies tragically. She, you know, marries Conrad. And it's like, you know, she jokes about like what she would have been better off marrying a cowboy, which I think is funny. But it's just kind of like the process of like, you have to accept people for who they are. And I think sometimes in this debate of climbing being selfish, there's kind of this analysis of it of like, well, if the person didn't climb, everything would just turn out amazing inherently and better. And you're like, well, maybe they don't climb and they hate their lives and they become an alcoholic and they kill themselves. Or maybe they don't climb and they get a job that they don't want and then they get run over by a bus 2 months later. Like the world is complex. There's a lot of scenarios where they don't do the thing they want to do and it turns out like horrifically worse. Maybe they become an addict. Maybe they fall into psychosis. Maybe they get insanely depressed. Like, you know, maybe something really good happens and they take care of their family. Like there's a lot of different avenues, but I don't like the equation of like, well, because there's risk, we can just expect that person inherently to give up their calling and their passion. And also if they gave up that passion, everything would just turn out miraculously. Better, yeah. And you're like, I just think all of those are just like inherent propositions built on like kind of nonsense. And so like, I've heard that a lot. And like, it's almost like osmosis, just like you hear the proposition of climbing selfish and everybody's like, oh yeah, climbing's really selfish. It's like, well, everything's fucking selfish.
Exactly.
When I wake up in the morning and I take a shower, that's selfish. You know, I eat food. That's like everything you do on some level is for yourself to fulfill needs and stuff. And of course, I'm kind of being like a dickhead here and just like being too reductive. But like, I truly mean that. Like, I don't actually know if I accept the proposition that climbing's selfish, or the caveat that I'll accept it's selfish if everybody else in the world wants to accept that they themselves are just equally as selfish. They just don't take on as much risk. Does that make sense, right?
Yeah. So this is where I would kind of fall under the fact being if you think of, you know, you think back to this, a very open person also is very gullible, you know, and as kind of like one example, or a very, you know, a very methodical person is also very rigid, right? So they tend to have their pros. And they're, you know, like the first thing is, you know, in most society's view is a pro. And in other ways, it's, you look at it and go, okay, their proclivity for this attribute is also extremely much more high. And so if you also look at, climbing being selfish, what do I also gain from being able to do this activity? It does it does require me to puzzle solve. It does require me to manage risk and to assess situations and to, the pros are it allows me to be, it allows me to, risk manage. And with that comes a much calmer head. I mean, going through life, the common day societal problems feel so mundane because if you look at it, you're going, well, I'm not on a cliff about to I'm not hanging off a cliff. Am I actually in danger? Mm-hmm. So I actually really calm under most, I can be grateful to say that in most circumstances that society usually causes anxiety in many people, I'm extremely calm about, level-headed about, and makes it very easy to address. And I go, what's the problem? It's really easy, and then you go from, you go to, that problem solving just naturally transitions over to problem solving. It causes you, to be a good climber, you have to be physically fit. There's no way to go about it. It requires discipline and fitness. And both of those things translate not only into your work, which society values. I'm a better worker because of my climbing, hands down. I'm a better puzzle solver because of my climbing, hands down. And being said is this fitness allows me to keep up. I can go to work, I can go climb, but I can also keep up with my toddler. I can essentially have energy to still, I go to work, I work a blue collar job as an electrician, being said is it's not the hardest blue collar job out there, but I'm still using my body for money in a sense.
Absolutely.
And so when I come home, I still have energy with the fitness that I've gained and the training that I've done for climbing specifically. It translates over to, cool, I have enough energy to help my wife with chores, to clean up after my kid, to play with my kid, to wrestle with my kid. It's like all these things. It's just like, it's really selfish when you inherently look at it. But what people benefit from as well can be just, if not greater when looking at it. Is it selfish? Yes, I'm not going to lie about that. It's damn selfish. But is it beneficial to society and my family? Hell yeah, it is.
I would say selfish is like a heroin addiction. If you're just doing heroin because it makes you feel good and it's just a complete detriment to yourself and to everybody around you, that's a completely selfish, negative connotation, self-serving behavior. I don't like the word selfish when applied to climbing. It's like, yes, there's risk attached to it, but just because it's risky doesn't make it selfish to me.
What word would you replace with it? Not to put you too much on the spot. At least something to chew on.
It's just an activity. I don't know. It's like I ride a motorcycle. Is that selfish? It's like, no, it's something I do. It's like, why is it selfish? It's like, yeah, it's self-serving, but just like Max alluded to, everything we do is self-serving.
Well, I think the same thing though. I would push back a little bit, although I don't think there's much of a difference. I think it's probably just the wording. But like with the heroin addiction one, it's the same thing. This person has something innate that isn't being met. That is, they just can't cope in some way.
But there's no net positive.
Yeah, but the idea that people are just choosing to do heroin, I don't inherently agree with at all. I think people do that just because they are just neurochemically, there's just so many things happening in their lives that they're suffering. So they just have a proclivity to escape. And for some people, that escape is just climbing. Look, I'm just fucking insane if I don't climb and exercise all the time. For some people, unfortunately, they're just broken or whatever circumstance have just led them to find that, hey, I can actually get this neurochemical stimulus from heroin. And then by the time, things have just gotten so out of control, it's just kind of the same mechanism of everybody in some level is self-serving and some things have way more risk. Obviously, I agree that climbing is a much more better mechanism than heroin addiction. So but it's just the broader point of the thing I was saying, or I think we're really teasing out here is because somebody's calling or something that truly makes them who they are happens to have more risk, the idea that inherently invalidates the thing and they shouldn't do it, I think that's like anti-human spirit in essence. Like that would essentially be like Alex Honnold shouldn't have done any of his amazing feats, and he should have just gotten an office job and fucked off.
All the people that settled the West Coast should have fucked themselves
totally,
and stayed on the East Coast.
Yeah, like shouldn't have explored. Astronauts shouldn't have gone to space. People shouldn't have, like whatever. You get the point, right? It's just like I just think there's like this anti-nature or like human proclivity to just like be yourself. You know what I mean? And so I don't know how to fully explore that.
It's interesting, actually. I think that like maybe it's because risk has become so fringe for most people.
Yeah.
Like it used to be commonplace. Like you walk out on the street, you risk fucking, I don't know, like a myriad of possibilities of death every day. And today, like it's so easy to just live and do nothing and never risk your life. And so now all of a sudden, like people are like, oh, you climb? That's crazy. It's so selfish of you. It's like, well, what have you fucking done? Like there's no risk anymore for people. And so it's become, like you said, so fringe. I think that's just like, to me, that like seals everything together.
I mean, it's just an extension of seeing that, it's just like, some people are perfectly happy with the societal norms, and power to them. And I'm glad that they can have that. And for many, unfortunately, I just like the polls show it, is the fact being is there is a type of, because people don't pursue something that they're passionate about, whether it be risky or not, it is in some way, the focus on utilitarianism and distraction ultimately leads us to have people are having a really large imbalance in a lot of their mental and physical states, because that's the societal norm of things. And I feel, I find that really unfortunate. And, it's just like our as a group, we've happily and thankfully found at least the starting direction to correct that imbalance within ourselves, though it is definitely not for everybody. It's just like, if anything, we can try to use that as inspiration towards pushing other people to go, every day can really suck if you don't do anything new. You don't try anything new. You don't try to learn. You just kind of accept the fact that, oh, everyone does this and everyone does that. It's just like, push yourself, have some discipline, and try to learn something new. I mean, it'll really imbue like a fire under you.
And then the risk you can take doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, if I risk this, I die. It's like, maybe it's just the risk of failure and whatever that word means to you.
Well, and so many people are scared of that.
Exactly.
And I mean, going out, it's just like going out to, like, the first attempt that we made on the Traverse was, we went out going, we're going to fail. And that's okay. And I think, trying to spread the message that it's okay to fail. As long as you set your margins up to be able to pick yourself back up.
Yeah. Recover.
Yeah.
You can kill yourself. And not have any chance to recover.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in the essence of time, I think for the show, let's circle back to kind of like the tail end of this Traverse.
Of course.
And just kind of like, bring us towards the closing.
For sure. And so that was the beginning. So climbing Sky Island and having that very climactic rappelling accident event take place was the beginning of day 3. And, this was what I was calling transition day from the, part 1. So the first half of the drainage itself to the second half of the drainage. The second half of the drainage was and Sky Island was peak 14. So we only had 6 left to hit. And from there, the peaks get bigger. They're less, but they get bigger in size. And so after hitting, peak 14, in between, there's a transitional one. It's called Avalokiteshvara Temple, also known as A Temple. So there was an individual called Courtney Purcell, which named a bunch of peaks, and he was very inclined towards the Buddhist nature. So he named a bunch of Zion peaks after Eastern religion. And so A Temple was just a sheer bushwhack fight. It was nothing more than third class. We fought our way up about an 800-foot face, just absolutely full of manzanita, just chest high manzanita. And so if anyone's been in Red Rocks or up in Zion National Park and dealt with these bushes, they put up a pretty good fight.
They're harder than stone.
Yes. And I mean, if you see them on a climb in these locations, you sling those first. If you say cam or manzanita, you go, I'm going to sling that manzanita. That thing's
For sure.
not,
it's not going anywhere.
Dude, if things can climb, things can grow in desert rock and hold still through the thick and thin. Dude, they're great handholds, they're great footholds, they're great anchors, they're great pieces of protection all day. Manzanita, team manzanita. And so, but fighting through forests of it, not as fun. So we crank up that and we come around and we go around to the west side of Meridian Tower, which is the biggest obstacle kind of in our midst of this would be the north side of the traverse. And so we go up on the west side heading northbound, and going up the first saddle, we take our bags up over the saddle. So you're on 40-degree sand, just sand hill for 800 feet, and you're wrestling about 8-foot tall scrub oak and manzanita all mixed in one, a forest mixed in one. And so most of the time your feet aren't even touching the ground. You're actually actively stepping on these stone strong manzanita bushes as you climb and get whipped in the face, and you're like squinting, even with sunglasses on, you're squinting your eyes because the branches are like reaching underneath your eyes, like trying to poke your eyes out. It's a full on fist fight, and they win most of the time. And so you get to the top of that, and as soon as we clip over onto the north end, we drop it over this saddle, which is which is about a third around the Meridian Tower on the west side. The whole canyon itself is about 1.5 miles long. And so we have to make that probably 1.25 miles before we pop a right around the north side. So we're circumnavigating the Meridian Tower. And so we drop over this saddle of where the trees were. We drop over a saddle about a third of the way through, and it drops into a canyon, which it drops into with this canyon. It's on the north side. So it's very shaded, very cold, and there's still plenty of snow. And from here, it's collectively scattered with something called potholes, which are usually, as water settles in sandstone, it tends to kind of just eat away at the sandstone until it makes these holes that are just, so deep that, many people and many canyoneers have unfortunately met their demise to potholes because they get stuck in them and then they drown. Because there's no escape out of them. So there's some famous canyons that are notorious for having potholes. There's like Heaps Canyon is one of the most famous ones for not only a plenty of rescues, but also for having the potholes themselves. There's an easy mode when they're full of water, you just swim right across, and then there's the hard mode where they're really low and you actively have to do hook moves to actually get. So you rappel yourself and maroon yourself into a pothole, and then have to actively do hook aid ladder moves to get out of these potholes. Otherwise, there's no means of escape. You slide into one of these without equipment and you're screwed.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's a slick sandstone bowl that's been worn away by the weathering water.
Wow.
And so
how diameter or diameter, like how big? Like 50 feet.
And so these potholes, most potholes that would be categorized as these things, usually anywhere from 5 to 20 feet in width, and they can go as deep as you damn near want them to. I mean, there's tremendous ones.
Are they conical or cylindrical?
Almost, I would say just my, I don't know, on vocabulary wise, it would be
like a conical.
It'd be a marble with the top cut off.
So like spherical.
Very spherical.
Okay. Very spherical.
And, it's just and almost perfectly so. It's amazing. Sandstone does beautiful things. And so anyway, the way that the snow covers down this canyon, it lays a perfect blanket. So you have something called trap doors along the way. And you could probably guess what that is kind of like crevasses we're probing with trekking poles to not fall into these potholes. The problem is by the time you're usually probing into them,
you're on top of them.
You're pretty much on top of them. And so, you know,
and now not only are you in a pothole, but now you're in a pothole that's covered in snow,
full of water.
Yeah.
And so, and so, you know, your partner behind you is very aware that you have the potential to punch through. So you take turns testing the waters, technically.
You guys are roped in like crevasse travel.
In this case, we, like I said, most of these potholes, based upon the depth of this canyon, we didn't expect our potholes to be much deeper than, you know, probably like 5 feet. So we knew that we could likely, you know, trekking pole or throw a rope in. We didn't feel like it would be you know, assessing the canyon that we were in, you know, like I said, once we wrapped the north side, there were potholes that were much deeper. Luckily we could circumnavigate them, kind of riding the ridge. And it's, you know, it's like being said is, should we have roped up? I think we should have roped up, but I think there's certain, it's these judgment calls you make as a party to where you look at things and you go time versus risk, and time in equivalent as well also equals effort. And so the less time you spend, the less effort you use. And so it's just this really fine balance. You know, I'm not going to say we made the most responsible choice, or the safest choice. But it's one of the effective choices. You know, we knew that if we fell in, which we did, that you're going to get wet, it's going to suck, and someone's going to have to pull you out of it. And so we have means of pulling out of it. And, you know, we felt that we could execute that. Nonetheless, yeah, we fell in it a couple of times. We navigated around the north side. We found a really perfect ramp up between the two. There's up the east side canyon around Meridian, which it goes up and then saddles really deep. And then so from there's 2 peaks that you're in between, which would be called the Chameleon on the left, which can only really be seen while you're atop one of the neighboring peaks. Otherwise than that, from anywhere around the park you look over, you can't really see it because it blends in, because the mesa caps are all of the same. Aside from the canyons that are carved in between them, all the mesa caps are the same elevation. And so each time, you know, to kind of stress where all this 18,000 feet's coming from is every time we go down a peak, we're going back up to that mesa top and then coming off that mesa top and go to the next peak and going up to that elevation and then back down. And so we get to a saddle between, that's kind of on the sub peak of the Chameleon on the east side of the canyon of the Meridian. And then from there, you know, Meridian is the 16th peak. So Skyline's 14, A Temple's 15, Meridian at 16. We had 2.5 hours left of light and we said, let's do it. And so I think we can crank it out. So we dropped our gear. We shoveled some food down. I was really hangry. I said, he was tempted. He's like, dude, if we crank it out today, 4th day, we can get off by sunlight. I was like, okay, that's tempting, but like, I'll stab you with a cam if you don't let me eat dinner right now.
Yeah.
And so shoveled food down, filtered some water. We cranked out Meridian Tower. We circumnavigated the Meridian Tower pretty much all the way down the east side. So about an additional mile, which required a bunch of horizontal soloing through bushes with really high exposure. Like I said, you're staring down at, you know, probably 600 to 1,000 feet, depending on where you are on the Meridian Tower. So, you know, you're yanking on bushes and going, these are kind of dead. And it's just kind of like, if you roped up for every single one of it, it would take a whole day. Yeah. And, you know, we wrap around it and, you know, for ease of, you know, because we found, you know, we knew more so through the research that I had done and some of the information that some people had provided me, I knew that there was possibly a good route on the east side that could potentially go at like 5-6. So it's like questionably soloable. And being said is we ended up getting, you know, going from camp to the top of the Meridian Tower was about collectively 1,300 feet worth of climbing. And like I said, probably a good half mile of it was horizontal soloing. And then we still had to go up to the remaining 700 of the cap itself, to the base of the mesa itself. And so we soloed up as much as we possibly could. And then the last 60 feet, I looked at the big rocks, you could easily pull off fridge-sized sandstone boulders. And I was just like, dude, throw a rope to me. Not worth it. It's the end of the day. I'm tired. I'm fatigued. Like, chuck a rope. And so he raced up it, chucked a rope for me. And we topped out the cap, and we had eyeballed a rappel close to camp. So we did two like a 65 meter and then a full 70 off of it, down climbed the snow ramps, got back to camp. That was the end of day 3. And then so on day 4, we wake up, and I wake up rough. I wake up pretty darn sick. And so we go over that east saddle. We continue down the east canyon of Meridian, and we kind of have to double back we double back up a cut in the side of the Chameleon, kind of like a zigzag. So when you're going down into there, you zigzag back. So you have to lose 500 to get back to where, to get back on there for a lot less technical, because we're trying to minimize the technical terrain we can, max it. We're trying to max it at low fifth if we can help ourselves with our big packs that we still have on. Because even on the 4th day, you're still carrying your climbing gear, you're still carrying your ropes, you're still carrying your camping gear. Even you start out at 45 pounds, you're still ending at around like 35. And so we get around the Chameleon, and we climb the north prow of the Chameleon, which is the last snow pitches that we have to actively climb, or last snow/mixed pitches that we have to climb, which was one of the scariest parts. Like I said, I was really happy I didn't have to lead it. Connor led those ones. Good job, Connor.
Friends like you who needs enemies,
And yeah, he was cranking on, like I said, the appliance boulders. He was cranking on, and they were shifting and moving. And it's just, you pull on one over here, the fridge, you pull on one over here, microwave. And it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, it's one of these things where, luckily enough, it's ridge climbing enough to where if it falls, it's not going to hit their belayer. But at the same time, it's just like when that stuff rolls over, it can cut your rope. It can cause some serious damage. And so, and especially on lead where, all the protection's really scanty, you can take some really, really bad falls off that. And so, you climb some more M1, M2, and some 5.8. And like I said, the grades don't sound terrible. But when the rock quality is extremely poor, the rock quality becomes more of a challenge over the difficulty of climbing itself. And you're 4 days in, you're just freaking shot. And so, thankfully we get to the top of Chameleon. We high five on that. That's number 17. We come down off the south prow with one rappel, probably around 30 meters. And at this point, our risk meters are pretty shot. We're actually taking a lot more risks than necessary for the sake of time, because we want to get, we're just terribly comfortable with the situations we're in. Talk about really desensitized. It's just kind of like you've been soloing so much that you're like, what's more soloing, right? We get down to the notch of the point. We rappel a really blank face, and then we climb the point, which is peak 18. It's just a prow. It's a tall prow, same elevation off of it. That's about 600 feet worth of soloing, going at about like 5.7. And we solo the whole thing up and the whole thing down. At this point, like I said, what's some more soloing? 90% of what we did was soloing.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's like, what's a little bit more?
Yeah.
And
the essence as well, right?
Yeah.
You're running out of food, water, grit, everything's,
exactly.
low. Yeah.
And so, we, once we finish that, we kind of traverse the landscape, and we do 3 different so we do a portion with 2 full 70 meters. And then the and then we did one more, and then we climb up on slabs. We transition for another 3/4 of a mile, as we're kind of like from the point to Big Red and the Beehive, the last final peaks, very convoluted up and down terrain. So you're kind of riding into the, you're kind of riding and climbing up towards the cliffs. And then you have to climb all the way down back to the, you have to kind of ascend 600, descend 600, ascend 600. And then occasionally you're reaching points to where you go, screw this. And then you rappel off sheer faces, so you don't have to walk all the way to the end and then drop back. You can do it without rappelling, but it would add so much time and so much effort that just rappelling saved a tremendous amount of time. And so collectively did 3 full rappels. That last 70 of it is where it got tremendously stuck. Wasn't hard. We just hand over handed it, top rope soloed, because it was so stuck. Anchors were not as strong as how stuck that rope was. Just top rope soloed off of the stuck rope itself. Got it undone. At that point, I'm looking pretty darn haggard. I'm feeling really sick. I'm coughing up a storm. My buddy looks at me and he says, "Give me your rope. Give me the rope." And I go, "No, dude, it's okay. I could totally carry it. Mm-hmm. It's fine." And he said, he's like, "Nope, give it over." And I said, "Okay. Well, if you need to give it back to me," he's looking at me. He's like, you're this like little sick puppy. Yeah. And I was just like, "Okay, carry me the rest of the way." Yeah. And it's like in the end, you look back and you go, that's what partnership's for. If he was in the same situation, I would do the same thing.
Yeah. You got to be able to accept help when you need to.
Exactly. Yeah. And, like taking a little ego shots as you're hiking along, you're like, well, I don't know, I probably could do it. But the pace that I would set having that additional weight, we would have been stuck in the night. I was moving way too slow with the weight that I was carrying, and he was able to pick that up. So we get to the last final slab between Big Red and the Beehive, which are just easy, nice second class slab walk-ups. It's just like, luckily enough, it's nothing technical to finish out the time. You get to the top of a very recognizable wall for many that are familiar with the park so we climb the final slabs, and like I said, we get to the base of the final slab to the notch between the saddle between these two. And I tell Connor, okay, normally I would be able to solo these. But I have to be really candid with you. If I climb these slabs without a rope, I'll die. I'm so tired. I'm so sick, and I'm so haggard that I will just fall off this. And, the sickness had caught up with me on day 4. It really just the first 3 days I was able to kind of like put it in the back pocket and kind of be like, yeah, I'm sick, whatever. I can't talk. Let's make fun of it. Be a tough guy about it. And day 4 just smacked me in the face, like a briefcase.
Yeah, you're just building a massive metabolic debt the whole time.
Yeah. Exactly. And we're at a caloric deficit the whole time. And just like, this whole, just slam me in the face. And at that point I go, I just have to be, I'm forced to be humble and go, if I want to make it home, like throw a rope at me. I'm pretty sure this is like 4th class terrain. And so anyway, I crawl my butt up that terrain, and we get to the saddle. We do the 2. We're at the top of that saddle between there. Very familiar to climbers that are familiar with the park would be the streaked wall. And so we're atop the streaked wall, and then we do the streaked wall descent, which is a very convoluted ridge line descent where that descends about 1,900 feet down. Yeah. And so it's like you finish the 20th peak and you go, cool, we did the traverse. And then it's like, okay, now we have to descend. It's not over till it's over. And so we descend the 1,900 feet, and we get back to the museum and Spiritual Light. And I'm just still super stoked that, we finished it. So it was from March 9th of 24 to March 12th of 24 as we completed this. So it's like I had a dream of establishing the longest climbing peak traverse in Zion, and we got it, and so it's just it's really surreal. I'm really happy to have gotten it.
It's a crazy accomplishment, man. It's absolutely insane. It's like for a lot of people, like a lifetime of climbing experience in like 4 days. That's wild. Yeah. And there's only been 2 other parties who have done, it's not the full traverse, but like a similar thing?
So there's been two parties. Yeah, there's been two parties that have done that. There's one that did there's two parties that have done it twice, done the lesser portion twice for different objectives. And then there was one that did the extended line, which was essentially, they did 12 of the 20 peaks originally. And then I said, let's throw in all the technical stuff. And then that's how this kind of came to be, and that one of those individuals that did the 12 is ultimately said, get up there and go do it. And I said, hell yeah. And then it just became bigger from there. And that's how this all came to be. And then the following 2 weeks, we were between the Chameleon and the Point. I had actually left, I had left trekking poles that had been with me. I had these black diamond carbon trekking poles that I had taken on over 100 peaks in Zion. And I left them on top of a 20-foot blank face rappel between the Point and the Chameleon. I was like, son of a bitch. I know they're up there.
Yeah.
I can't see them, but I know they're up there. And it was just a freak. It was just a freak incident. There was a fourth party 2 weeks later that they did only 6 of the, they had a really bad, they were going to do the extended line and they had a really, just nothing was in their favor. So they ended up just doing the line as bare minimum as possible. So they did 6 peaks out of the 12 extended, and they ended up picking up the sticks. And 2 weeks later, and it was not, but, a month after the traverse was completed, that I stumbled upon meeting the guy that had my trekking poles. And he said, there's a partner that said, hey, dude, they did the traverse over there, and dude, he wants to share information with you. I was like, oh, cool. And so I got to talk to him. He's like, dude, did one of you leave trekking poles behind on it? I was like, oh my gosh. And so it was just this I'm not a very nostalgic person, very connected to equipment. Equipment gets used, equipment gets retired, or equipment gets given away to someone else who might need it, and, it's like, that's one of those pieces of equipment that if I had to go back and get those, it was 2 days minimum to grab them. And I was like, well, so be it, nature claims it. But to a month later to have these sticks come back to me, I was just like, wow, it's kind of one of those sayings where, if you really love it, let it go. And
sometimes it comes back, right?
Yeah. I didn't know that applied to stuff sometimes.
I don't think they're talking about trekking poles at that saying, but yeah.
How has the community received this accomplishment?
So far it's been only positive, truly. And
do you think how many people can truly grasp what you've actually done?
I've been trying to translate to the people, and like I said, we all live our own perspectives. So I don't know truly, but if I'd say very few, can kind of envision kind of reliving, living out that kind of what that entails. And I want to try to translate it the best I can, just so people can, so people don't have to do it. And so they can vicariously, if they don't want to, so that they can, you can story tell and kind of tell it vicariously through yourself, the best ability. And, you can only do so much. It's kind of like, when someone says, hey, I free soloed El Cap, it's like, okay, cool. We've climbed hard walls and we've, climbed in Yosemite, climbed big walls, but yet I still lack the comprehension of, or Moonlight Buttress, close to my backyard. It's just I still can't comprehend someone going out and free soloing Moonlight Buttress. It's, so as an example, it's even though we're so close to having a perspective, I don't know if I ever can fully translate it to individuals without them trying it, but I can do my darn best. But I guess to give a really long and slight digressed answer, I think only a handful of people can probably understand.
Yeah. What about the broader implications for yourself personally? What has this changed in you? How has this changed how you see the future? What's next? How has this shifted who you are?
This has shown me of how much the human body can do, to sound cheesy, but like it instills me to train harder. And like, I go, okay, I was sick for this. You know, what can I do healthy and what can I do trained? And how can I, like, honestly, like it really opens up the opportunity to try bigger things and be confident about it, you know? So it's just like I said, with adventure, it's not, you know, like obviously there's some difficulty that comes into play that is attractive, but you know, like nothing I talked about in difficulty. I mean, the Traverse goes at 5.9 plus the hardest, right? It's more about the adventure at hand and the logistics and difficulty of like putting it all together. Ridge climbs are fascinating to me, and peak, you know, connecting link ups is fascinating to me. That's what's really cool. It doesn't matter particularly how hard it is. Maybe a little bit, you know, otherwise I'd be on the whirl or something, you know, just like running ridges. Not that, you know, it's ridiculously hard, but it's not terribly technical. I want a little bit of technicality, just enough. But to make it challenging enough to where it's just like, you know, I still have so much to, you know, over 85% of Zion National Park is wilderness zone. That there's a lot of mountains out there, or a lot of desert peaks out there. So it's just like looking at building bigger link ups. I now see that as possible, you know, convincing a partner. I mean, that might be, that might be harder than the next Traverse.
Yeah.
But but it feels within grasp. You know, it's like I already have ideas that I'm piecing together, and it's just like I wouldn't have ever thought of that, you know. And then this also lays out other opportunities, like, you know, in the summer I want to go to the Bugaboos, and I want to, like said, Connor and I intend to, like, you know, I guess a pre-spray a little bit, in the sense being of like, I hope we're good enough and trained enough to be able to attempt like all along the Watchtower and do it in a day. Like if we can manage that, like that would be amazing. And so it's just like, it allows me to have, doing stuff like that allows me to have inspiration to try and maybe even fail, you know? And so it's just like, you know, go out and fail.
Awesome, man. I mean, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
Thanks for listening.
I think it's incredibly inspiring. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I like was there with you the whole time. So I think it's, just an amazing story. I don't know.
Yeah, man. I think just likewise, like, thanks so much for coming on. It was amazing having a conversation with you, and really like great to be able to just deep dive into like that Traverse and that adventure and going through that. And then also just, you know, teasing out those more like philosophical things of like how climbing, once again, just like transcends just the physical climbing, right? It's like, it's more like embodying like spirit and who we are, and just taking on more. And yeah, I just think you really eloquently put that through with that story. So thanks a lot for sharing.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wicked, man.
Cue the closing music.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Where's the button? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice.